turn-based combat isn't dead. I kind of want Square Enix to do something of the same. Not copy Atlas, not copy the developers of Expedition 33, but create something new for the Final Fantasy that essentially brings a different form of life to a turn-based genre. On June 9, 2026, a Nintendo Direct was showcasing their new up-and-coming lineup of games for their Nintendo Switch 2. An exciting list of both new and old third-party games was finally coming to the Nintendo handheld console that many, including me, were always hoping could one day be seen. Games such as Stellar Blade, Devil May Cry 5, Dragon's Dogma 2, Dark Arisen, and even the long-anticipated Kingdom Hearts 4, which honestly I wasn't even expecting to hear anything from Kingdom Hearts 4, much less on the Switch 2, are on a Nintendo Direct. So that caught me by complete surprise. Strangely enough, what caught my eye was a game that I thought looked oddly familiar. An old game that they were bringing back for a new audience maybe. And the more I watched, it hit me. Oh, this is FF Brave Exvius, that mobile game I tried a while ago. I heard it had a good story, but me personally, I just couldn't get past that mobile game aspect of it. And then, bam! Final Fantasy Resonance. What? No, I'm sure it's Brave Exvius. Maybe they're just giving a new name or something. You know, I was thinking to myself. And I didn't play much of the mobile game, so I just kind of assumed that those gameplay elements that they were showing in the trailer was already part of the mobile game and, you know, just ported over to the console. And then I saw this video from the director saying that, yes, they did take the first part of the story from Brave Exvius, but the game itself has been completely remade from the ground up to become its own full-fledged single-player console game. Although I understood what the words that he was saying, my brain just it took some time for it to completely register what exactly this meant. So he was saying we got a full Final Fantasy story, an explorable world map, riding chocobos, I'm pretty sure I saw a riding airship, old school turn-based RPG while having its own, you know, kind of gimmick thing going on, a staggered gimmick. And then it finally hit me. Oh my god! This is an old school Final Fantasy game. Like, Square Enix finally did it for Final Fantasy. I know they already had that old school turn-based style with like Bravely Default, Octopath Traveler, and I think there's another game that's escaping my head right now, but for Final Fantasy, you just kind of assume with the direction they were going with, you know, starting from 12, honestly, and then 13, and then 15, and then 16, that, and even with the remake trilogy that's coming out, with the last part coming out, that, oh no, they're just not gonna go back to that old school Final Fantasy style that, you know, we grew up with, right? Or at least you're thinking they're not gonna do it for a Final Fantasy title anymore. And then here we are. All of a sudden we have a Final Fantasy in its traditional style of gameplay. Now, does this mean that Square is suddenly going to give up on modern FF? Again, like Final Fantasy 15, 16, the remake trilogy. Personally, I don't think they're going to do that. And I don't want them to, which is kind of strange because I grew up on the old school FF games. You know what I mean? My first game was Final Fantasy 8 as far as JRPG goes. Then went to 7, 9, 10, Tactics. Branched out to like, you know, Xenogears, to Legend of the Dragoon, the Breath of Fire series, the Lunar Legend series, Wild Arms. You know, I grew up on JRPG games. So it might sound weird that like, oh, why don't you want them to go back to you know, to the traditional stuff? That's what you grew up with. And again, maybe a hot take, but for me, I also enjoy modern FF. I do. I enjoyed the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, for example. Remake, I felt was kind of janky, but when I played Rebirth for the first time, I really enjoyed it. So when it comes to modern Final Fantasy games, I feel that Rebirth, and from the looks of the new trailer Revelation, encapsulates what a true modern Final Fantasy would be. Exploration, combat that integrates all the mechanics of, say, the OG FF7 with materia building, being able to essentially dictate what each character will be doing and what its role would be, and still being able to essentially use that role depending on the situation. And then adding on tag team skills that you can just do on battle, and then tag team like special moves, which makes it feel like a party system within a real-time action battle, essentially, right? And then you, of course, you add the storytelling, you add the cutscenes, you add the beautiful music, and you add all the mini games, which in my opinion FF7 was really known for, because it had a lot of mini games, but making those mini games diversified enough so that it doesn't feel like you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again, which I feel like a lot of just modern games in general kind of force you into. So for me, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was more of a breath of fresh air, and I like, how you say, modern progression of an old school game into a more action oriented game while still keeping the feel of Final Fantasy into it. But now, saying all that, I think creating a new line of Final Fantasy games that caters to the old school experience is something that I feel is very much wanted and actually quite needed. Not only does this bring a gameplay style that, old heads like me can go back to and enjoy and feel that classic style of gameplay, but it also brings a pathway for a different kind of innovation for Final Fantasy. So just like how Atlus innovated the turn-based genre with its stylized presentation of Persona 5's combat system, or how developers of Expedition 33 essentially pumped in new life in the genre and showed that, hey, turn-based combat isn't dead. I kind of want Square Enix to do something of the same. Not copy Atlus, not copy the developers of Expedition 33, but create something new for the Final Fantasy that essentially brings a different form of life to a turn-based genre. So instead of saying like, oh, do one or the other, I think the Final Fantasy series is the series where you can do two things at once. Imagine having a Final Fantasy game that has that modern action feel, but also have another line in the series that brings that old school like feeling back to life, And I feel like Final Fantasy Resonance is the perfect game that they can go back to, because in these interviews, in these videos that they've shown, the story of Final Fantasy Resonance is only one part of the whole, I think, 10-year tenor that Brave Exvius had. So if this does really well, if they do this game really well, and it grabs the attention of people, imagine just a whole new series that old heads can enjoy and just feel like that old Final Fantasy again. So just imagine Final Fantasy Resonance and then Final Fantasy Resonance 2. And it just, each new entry into the lineup just becomes more and more innovative. They add something extra, they create something more. Maybe they move away from HD 2D art style and into a more modern art style. Maybe they say, okay, let's try and change things up. Let's move away from the pixel era and make something like a more modern graphic updated Final Fantasy game, but keeping that all the things that we've learned to do, all the battle mechanics that we've added in, say, Resonance 1, 2, and 3, and now we're gonna make 4 into this new Final Fantasy. Like a branched line of Final Fantasy game that oh my gosh, now we have different flavors of Final Fantasy. What? How does that not excite you? I'm personally super excited what could happen and what could this new, I guess you could say, entry into the Final Fantasy series can bring into the genre itself, especially now that it's available on the Switch 2, and the Switch 2 I feel is like this very accessible piece of hardware that it's almost plug and play, and now that Final Fantasy games in general aren't exclusive to a console anymore, this just brings more and more opportunities and, I guess you could say, innovation into potentially two branching art styles. And I don't know, I the future feels bright when it comes to these series, and I really hope Square Enix puts money and budget into this so that we can feel that love again that we used to feel back then, but feel it again now without having the need for nostalgia goggles. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope this piqued your interest. If you guys tell me what your guys' opinion of it is. Is this something that excites you? Is this something, do you feel like it's just a cash grab for them? Or do you think that Square Enix is really trying to, reach out their hand to an audience, or at least a part of the audience that they feel that they've alienated over the past few entries of their series? Let me know in the comments. Again, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.